Hello everyone, and welcome to the Component 1, creating a better user experience with WPF Webinar. I want to thank you all for joining and hope that everyone, regardless of your current proficiency level, will learn at least one new thing about WPF development. My name is Mateen and I'm the lead technical engagement engineer at Component 1. I also have with me Sergey Kudrytsky, one of my colleagues on the technical engagement team, who will help me conduct this webcast. He will also be monitoring your questions. Should you have a question, please feel free to submit it at any time via the GoToWebinar questions feature. Sergey will be checking the chat board as well, and we will attempt to answer the questions that are in the queue. If we cannot answer the questions on the spot, then we will follow up after the webcast. The purpose of this webcast is to introduce you to a few concepts in WPF, as well as go over how WPF can help you create a better user experience. And so this webcast is the first of a series of deep dive webcasts into specific technologies and techniques for the various Microsoft development platforms. Future webcasts will follow a deeper curriculum and focus on specific development patterns and techniques, including those for ASP.NET, WinRT, XAML, Windows Phone, and even Windows Forms. It will be our pleasure to present to you today some basics of WPF, what makes for a good user experience, walk through some sample code in MVVM Pattern, and a basic introduction to Prism. One final item before we begin is that I will be sending each of you a follow-up survey after this webcast. The survey is brief and will ask you to rate the various sections of this webcast. It will enable you to specify your areas of interest that we can consider for inclusion in future webcasts. The survey is very important because it enables us to continually improve quality and to deliver free webcasts to you that address your areas of interest. So after this webcast, I will email you a link to the survey. Next week, I will send everyone a follow-up package that will include the presentation slides, demo code, and a log of the Q&A. Okay, let's get started, but let's get started on a lighter note. I like to do these brain teasers once in a while, just to get our brains going. So here's the question. The question is the blocks marked with A and B. The blocks marked with A and B, are they the same color? And the interesting thing is they are the same color. They are the same color, and the reason why they seem to be different is that our minds are trained in a way to recognize shadows, and are trained by shadows, trained in a way to recognize shadows that distort our perception. So that's why A and B look a little different in their backgrounds, but they are the same color. And towards the end of the presentation, we will show you how they're the same color. Now, WPF overview. As you know, Microsoft dropped support for Windows XP some time ago. With that, software providers and developers found themselves needing to upgrade and update their software to support Windows 7 and Windows 8. And so we've seen a surge in the need to migrate VB6 applications and older applications to support a more modern operating system. At Component 1, we've received calls and emails from all over wanting to find the best way to migrate and upgrade applications. This is one reason, albeit a secondary reason, for this webinar. That's to better familiarize individuals with WPF and the benefits of WPF. Microsoft describes WPF as a next-generation presentation system for building Windows client applications with a visually stunning user experience. And so WPF is part of the .NET Framework 3.0 and higher. WPF applications can be standalone applications, or they can be hosted in a browser as long as XMAP is enabled. WPF combines application UIs, 2D and 3D graphics, documents and multimedia into a single framework. Its rendering engine, which is vector-based, uses hardware acceleration of modern graphic cards. This gives you a faster UI, a scalable UI, and a UI that's independent of resolution. All measures in WPF are logical units, not pixels. A logical unit is 1/96th of an inch. If you increase the resolution of your screen, the user interface stays the same size. It just gets crisper. Since WPF builds on a vector-based rendering engine, it's incredibly easy to build scalable user interfaces. WPF separates the appearance of a user interface from its behavior. The appearance is generally specified in the XAML file. The behavior is specified in a managed programming language like C# or VB. The two parts are tied together by data binding events and commands, and this separation of appearance and behavior brings us some benefits, and some of those benefits are the appearance and behavior are loosely coupled, the designer and developer can work on separate models, graphical design tools like Microsoft Blend can work on simple XAML documents instead of parsing code. Globalization and localization for applications is greatly simplified. Controls in WPF are highly composable, and what I mean by this is that you can define almost any type of control as content for another control. You can, for instance, put an image into a button to create an image button, or put a list of controls, a list of videos into a combo box to choose a video file. Because of the strict separation of appearance and behavior, you can easily change the look of a control. The concept of styles lets you skin controls almost like CSS and HTML does. The templates let you replace the entire appearance of a control. Notice that your users, what your users need or what they're looking for, what they care about is a fresh and professional look to your application. They care about content. They care about the speed. These are all elements of the first impression of a person. Missouri University of Science and Technology used eye tracking software to follow eye movements and determined that it takes an average of 2.6 seconds for a user's eye to scan an entire web page. Now imagine an application that is smaller in viewing area. With everything we've talked about so far in the overview of WPF, from scalability, speed, and vector-based engines, I'm sure you can appreciate how WPF can be used to enhance users' experience. You can imagine these benefits in comparison to VB6 applications or even WinForms applications, and how much of a better and more powerful application you can build with WPF. All of that power and crisp UI translates to a better user experience for your end users. Aside from these innate features of WPF, there are certain development patterns and designs within WPF that help not only to enhance user experience, but also to enhance the flexibility and maintenance of your applications. So I'm talking specifically about Prism, but we'll come back to this a little bit later on. Let's talk about this. What makes for a good user experience? What makes for a good user experience? Planning a great user experience starts much before the user's first look at the application. It takes a team, not just a single person, but rather a team of people to develop a user experience that will retain your users. This honeycomb design feature was actually developed by one such innovative individual, and I've provided a link to his blog about user experience. And the majority of this slide is taken from his blog, but rather, so he said that there are these 7 features that make up a good user experience. The first one he says is usefulness, that your content, that your application has to be useful, so that as practitioners we can't be content to paint without within the lines drawn by managers. We have to be courageous and creative to ask whether our product and systems are useful, and to apply our knowledge and craft and medium to define innovative solutions that are more useful. Secondly, that the application has to be usable, that has to remain useful, and this usability, the ease of use is a vital portion. But it's the interface-centered methods and perspectives of human-computer interaction don't address all dimensions of application design. So usability remains necessary, but it's not sufficient all by itself. your application has to be desirable. It has to evoke some sort of an emotion. So we can't just concentrate on one portion of it, but the application we have to show appreciation for the power and value of image and identity and brand and other elements of emotional design. And for emotional design, I highly recommend you take a look at Don Norman's book, Emotional Design: Why We Love or Hate Everyday Things. And the next point he mentions is that your application should be findable. The content in your application should be findable. So we have to strive to produce something that's navigable, that your users are interested in some subject, and that subject should be clearly visible, clearly findable for the end users, so that they can find what they need. Your application should be accessible. Just like buildings have elevators and ramps, our applications should also be accessible to people with disabilities. Not everybody uses a keyboard. Not everybody uses a mouse. So we have to make that available. Make our applications accessible to those who are not able to use a mouse, for example. Your application has to be credible, and the content that you display in your application has to be credible. And how do you make that? How do you make sure that it's credible? You can use professional references, and there's actually a lot of things that you can do. And if you look at Stanford's website, they've actually done a lot of research on this and how to make things credible, how to make your content credible. And lastly, your application should be valuable. So your application has to deliver some value to the end user. And if you're using advertisements, it has to deliver some value to the sponsors. For nonprofits, for example, the user experience must advance the mission and the like. So let's take a look at Prism. We mentioned that one of the values of WPF is implementing certain patterns and techniques, and Prism is certainly one of those important patterns and techniques that we need to be aware of. In fact, Prism is a framework for developing composite applications. Composite applications are specifically those applications, as we'll be developing later on in this demo, in this webinar. Composite applications are essentially applications whose parts are separated, that the model view and the model and the data and everything like that is separated from each other. It allows you to take a larger or complex application and break it down into smaller, more manageable pieces. Prism is specific to the XAML platforms, so specifically for WPF, Silverlight, Windows Phone, Windows 8, etc. Prism relies heavily on design patterns to provide loose coupling and separation of concerns. Some of the common patterns are dependency injection, command pattern, MVVM, and among others. In other words, Prism restructures your application from a jumbled application where all the code, the views, the data access, etc. are all intertwined, such that if you change one thing, if you change a small portion of a class, it adversely affects the rest of your application. If you change one part of a class, it could potentially destroy and break your entire application. And so the idea of Prism is to have this is that you have this mess of a code, and Prism essentially allows you to organize into something like this, something that's nice, structured, composite application where the major functional areas of the application have been identified and separated from other functional areas of the application. Now, if you make a change to the first building, it will not have any effect as to what happens in the other buildings. Because of this feature, Prism encourages team development, where one developer develops one building and another developer works on another portion of the project. And it encourages flexibility in the reuse of code, and you can imagine this. As stated previously, Prism relies on certain fundamental design patterns, one of which we will take a look at today, and this is the MVVM design pattern. So let's talk about MVVM. MVVM stands for Model View View Model. And this pattern evolved along with WPF as a new way of designing and building visual applications. So it's not a new technology. It's not a new pattern. It's not something new. Rather, it was innately part of WPF that essentially was naturally part of the programming concept developed as part of WPF, such as binding and data templates. MVVM simply separates an application into three parts, and the first part is the model. The model in the MVVM pattern encapsulates business logic and data. Business logic is simply any application logic that is concerned with the retrieval and management of application data, and for making sure that any business rules that ensure data consistency and validity are imposed. To maximize reuse opportunities, models should not contain any use case specific or user task specific behavior or application logic. Typically, the model represents the client-side domain model for the application. It can define data structures based on the application's data model or any supporting business and validation logic. The view, its responsibility is to define the structure. It is essentially what the end user is looking at. So its responsibility is to define the structure and appearance of what the user sees on his screen. It is the only place a XAML file will be located. Ideally, the code behind of a view contains only a constructor that calls the initialized component method. So you wouldn't have anything else aside from this constructor in the XAML file. You should not put any logic code in the view that you need to unit test. Typically, logic code in the view's code behind would be tested via a UI automation testing approach. The view model portion is in the MVVM pattern encapsulates the presentation logic and data for the view. It has no direct reference to the view or any knowledge about the view's specific implementation or type. The view model implements properties and commands to which the view can data bind and notifies the view of any state changes through change notification events. The properties and commands that the view model provides define the functionality to be offered by the UI, but the view determines how that functionality is to be rendered. The view model is responsible for coordinating the view's interaction with any model classes that are required. So essentially what you have is you have the model, which is your data, or the classes that take in data, and then you have the view, which is the representation of what the client sees on his machine or her machine. And the view model essentially is between, where is a go-between between the two. So it takes the data from the model and puts it on the and the view displays it. So let's take a look at a sample code implementing MVVM pattern. So let's go ahead and create a WPF application that implements MVVM, and we'll just name it WPF MVVM. And when this project loads, I'm going to create 3 folders for these 3 parts of MVVM, and this is model. We're going to create another one for view, and a third one for view model. The first thing that I'm going to add is access my SQL Server database. So I'm going to go ahead and add a link to SQL class and note the name, and I'm going to leave it as that. So as that gets added into the model folder, we're going to go ahead and use the Server Explorer. That is my database. I'm going to go ahead and refresh the database, drill down into it in the tables, and I'm going to use the customers database and simply drag the customers table onto the screen here. And so it creates all the classes that are needed. The layout and the designer and everything like that is created automatically. So let me go ahead and save it at this point. I'm going to close it. We're done with the model class. The next thing that we're going to need to create is the model view. And in order to create the model view, and this is a simple class, so I'm going to go ahead and add this, create a class here. And the naming convention dictates that you name it the same way as your view class. And the view class is simply this main window.xaml. So let me go ahead and actually move that into the view window, the view folder. So we're going to create a view model and name it main window view model. Main window view model. Main window view model.cs. Okay, and we're going to import or reference the WPF.model. We're going to change this class to a public class, and we're going to create a private list entity of customers, and we're just going to call it cust. And then we're going to create a constructor. And inside that constructor, we're going to add a reference to the data context of this data class in the model. So we're going to add a data context, an instance of that data context. So we're going to go ahead and data context, so DC equals new data context. We're going to use the cust that we just created, and using link filtering and querying, we're going to query and get the data. So from data in dc.customers, select data. And we're simply going to pass that into a list. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to create a public list of customers, and we're going to call this just customers. And what we're going to do is use the getter and setter properties. So we're going to get, in the getter we return cust. In the set, we simply set our variable equal to value. And that's all we really have to do with this. This is all we need for this specific portion of the view model. So we can actually leave this off, and we're done with this. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to open up this XAML file. We're going to open the XAML file and modify and reference this view model that we just created. So we're going to use XML and S, and call it local equals CLR dash namespace. Whoops. WPF MVVM, and we're going to reference the view model. Okay, so here we're going to do window.data context, and we're going to reference the data context that we created in the view model. So we're going to do local and view model, and that's it. And we need to build this application, because that's why this is highlighted here, is because we need to build the application. And once it builds, it'll be good to go. Now before we place any controls on the form, I want to create some row definitions. So let's do that. Grid.row definitions. So row definition, height, auto, and row definition, height, asterisk. All right, so row definition is created. The next thing to do is place a control, and let's go ahead and throw on here a flex grid. So let's view this a little better here. Okay, let's throw on the flex grid, and let's change some things here real quick. So let's add this to grid.row equals 1, and let's add auto-generate columns as true, and we can actually even set the item source to binding path equals customers. And you can see the data populates. One last thing I want to do for future is just name it. And we're just going to call the FlexGrid FG. And at this point we can actually run the application, but before I run it I need to change the app.xaml because I moved the main window into another folder. I moved it into the view folder. So I need to change that. Let's save it, close it, and run it. And you can see that the FlexGrid loads and all the data is in there. While I absolutely did nothing. I did nothing to the code behind. There was no binding, I didn't touch the code behind at all. Now, in order to increase user interaction, in order to increase user experience or improve user experience, I want to give the users the ability to filter. I want to give them the ability to group. And in order to do that, actually, FlexGrid already has the innate ability to do that. So let me go ahead and add two DLLs: the group panel, the FlexGrid group panel, and the FlexGrid filter DLLs on here to this project. And what I'm going to do is just before the FlexGrid, I'm going to reference the group panel DLL, and I'm going to give it a background of beige. I'm going to put it in grid.row 0, and I'm going to give it the FlexGrid binding element name FG. That's it. That gives you, and you can see that the grouping panel has shown up. The next thing I want to do is give the user the ability to filter, and again, this is an innate feature of the FlexGrid, so I'm going to simply just reference the necessary DLL here. And again, do that, and that's it. And this gives the user the ability to filter. So let's go ahead and run that and see how that works out. So you can see the filter shows up, so we can filter as many as we want here. If we check some of these checkboxes, we can see only when we want to only see the ones that are checked off, we can do that as well. Similarly, we can actually just want to show the ones that are labeled Mr. And we can do that, and we can filter. We can sort all of this features available. We can group by the title. We can group by the name. We can group by the last name. We can group by all of these. And so you can see the grouping is enabled and filtering is enabled. So just a very, very, very simple application showing the MVVM pattern, MVVM design in action. So let's go back to our demo. Let's go back to our PowerPoint presentation rather. So we did the demo, and let's take a look at the MVVM pattern again. Let's wrap up the MVVM pattern. So some of the major advantages of MVVM pattern is that it provides the best separation of concerns. So under MVVM, view is in charge of the visual representation, while the non-visual view model is in charge of all the interaction with the rest of the software, including model, the services, if there are any, and usually that would be taken care of by the model, and the rest of the view models. All of the MVVM advantages derive from this feature. And so you have flexibility and customization as part of the advantages of MVVM, such that the different views can be used with the same view models. So you can have different views, different screens using the same view model, allowing completely different visual representations of the same functionality depending on what different different customers want. You're able to reuse the code. So because of separation of visual and non-visual functionality, both the views and the view models have high potential for reuse. And then if the visual and non-visual functionalities were mixed, since for example, a non-visual functionality usually would not be able to make use of functionality that contains a visual part of it. Separation of the UI design and development, MVVM makes it possible to separate the work of the developer and the designer as clearly as possible. At first, the developer can produce an application with the crudest possible GUI, which is the view in essence. Then the designer, using designer tools, will be able to modify that view without touching any non-visual code. For testing, writing automated tests for visual applications is usually not easy. The view model separation allows the view model to be unit tested without the view. Since the view model is in charge of the interactions with the rest of the application, such unit tests would cover the most important functionality, while the view tests will only have to contain testing of the visual features, for example, the colors, animations, etc. So going back to that brain teaser that I mentioned, since we're wrapping up, we're going to go ahead and talk about this. Now, the brain teaser said that the blocks A and B are the same color, but our minds see it differently. Let's see how they're the same color. If we place a rectangle connecting the two with a single color, we see that they're actually the same. And this is amazing. Just like I said, that the way shadows work, our minds interpret the images differently. Our minds interpret the images differently. And so we think that A is a darker color as opposed to B, and yet they're actually the same color. So I would like to thank all of you for taking the time to watch this webcast. I hope that you're taking away something new no matter what your current level of expertise is. If you would like to contact me with questions, comments, or creative ideas, please feel free to drop me a line or email. Also, please remember to complete the survey that I'll be sending you, as that will really help us to serve you with some great new webcasts. I'll also be sending you a link to the contents of this webinar. And once again, if there are no questions, Sergey? No? Okay, so I thank everyone again, and I highly encourage everyone to go to our website and download the fully featured trial of our controls. And you can also contact sales for any if you have any questions at the information or at the methods via the methods listed on this slide. You can contact them at sales@component1.com, or call them, or you can chat live with them on our website. I'd like to thank all of you. I'd like to wish all of you a great day and happy programming from Component 1.